Friday night, fascinating matchup given the recent history of both these teams. The Swans finished top of the ladder, but their form towards the end of the season was a little bit shaky, while Port powered home to a second-placed finish, but were pantsed in that qualifying final, as we have touched on. And there's some interesting history between these teams. So Port have won the last 8 clashes between these two, including the most recent one in round 21 this year by 112 points. I don't know where to start with this, because you can look at that most recent clash, or you can look at the current form of these teams. It's fascinating because you probably say that, obviously, the stat that you raised before, where teams come back from these 100-point losses, Sydney have to be overwhelming favourites in this, even though the recent history suggests that might not or should not be the case.
Oh, they are. I mean, they've got the week off. They're rested. They are playing at home. They've been the better team. Like, I know it's 1v2 for the home and away season, but they've been the better team all year. And even that period of the year towards the back end, I think people look at that and think they were playing, like, they weren't being beaten by much. That was really the only game they were just shocking in. Every other lot, a lot of the losses they had were by single digit margins. They will be the favourite. They deserve to be the favourite. For me, this game, what I'm fascinated to watch is the midfield battle. Maybe the two best midfield trios in the league: Heaney, Warner, Goulden, Butters, Rosie, Jason Horne-Francis, going head to head. And I think we've spoken about it a bit over the last couple of weeks, that finals are won and lost in the midfield. As good as Jesse Hogan is, they didn't win, and
Yep.
finals won in the midfield. And so who can get the better of the midfield battle on Friday night? Now, when they last played, those 3 guys for Port Adelaide, throw in Wines and Drew as well, I think they had about 30 clearances, 30 inside 50s, and about 70 contested possessions between the 5 of them. They absolutely smashed them. So the Swans will know they have to be much better than they were, but I think they certainly can be. I don't think anyone doubts that.
Yeah. Score sources are going to be interesting for this one, I think, Christian. When you talk about a team that has it has been missing throughout finals, Kane Farrell and Dan Houston. For a team that launches a lot of its scores from back 50, Port need to find a way to do this against Sydney, because they have done it in the past.
Yeah, and Port, sort of second highest percentage coming from D50, or second best percentage from scoring from D50. A lot of it has been for Houston, for Farrell, but last week they were able to do again Burgoyne and Logan Evans from behind the ball and things like that. So that's one area where Port Adelaide moved the ball. They're sort of top 3 for moving the ball from one end to the other. Swans are sort of 7th and 5th at their own stat, but they're top 3 for defending ball movement. So Port Adelaide love to sort of go end to end and sort of try to score with a nice open forward line as much as possible. They can also score from a lot of forward half intercepts, which Port do. But yeah, the Swans will sort of make it hard for Port Adelaide to get that end-to-end ball movement going. And then the other end of the field is the inside 50 stuff. So I think the interesting one for me is looking at Sydney all year, and if you had spoken about breaking their game down, it was they need more forward of the ball. You know, will Amati be there by grand final day? Will McLean be playing? And it's sort of, you know, they don't have a true key forward and someone you can't rely on.
But we know they can win even if all 3 of them, McDonald, Amati and McLean, even if none of them fire, we know they can still win.
That's what I was going to say. So they're the number 1 team for scoring per inside 50 this year, Sydney. So for all the talk of their forward line, and they're still trying to find the right forward line, no team scored better than Sydney when they got it 50 metres out. They scored a goal, the best of anyone. They sort of, had the 6th best accuracy of anyone. Port Adelaide's point of view, they scored a goal, the 14th most often per inside 50 and 18th for accuracy. So they dump it in there and had a lot of entries and sort of just try to scrounge away. Sydney, as I said, a lot more cleaner with their entry. So looking at an early sort of stat count for this game, expect Port Adelaide to be sort of probably win the inside. If it's going to be a close game, Port Adelaide's going to win the inside 50 count and maybe not turn it into enough scores.
Yep.
Whereas Sydney can probably finish 5-10 behind in the inside 50 count, but their actual potency and their way they've been able to score this year should be able to sort of keep them even in this game. So, few areas, as you said, midfield very, very hard to find. Two very good midfields.
Similar, good quality.
Port are going to be better at moving the ball transition-wise, whereas Sydney are a much more cleaner forward 50 team.
I think Sydney, this is what it comes down to for me in terms of prediction. I think we're getting to that point now. Sydney has more margin for error in this game. Sydney can play at a B level and still win this game more times than they lose it. I don't know if Port can win if they don't play at their absolute... Like, if they don't play an A to A+ game, I don't know if Port can win. Now, I don't know if I'm getting carried away or that's wrong, and I don't know how we quantify what it's an A, B, C, but I think Sydney can be at... Sydney doesn't have to be at their best to win. I think Port does. especially on the road, especially having played the extra game, and what we spoke about, we don't get full four-quarter performances from them. So I think Sydney has more margin for error, and for that, I think that's the reason why they will win.
A couple of potential changes. So Callum Mills will go out, pinged his hamstring at training. Has he done? Has he ever injured himself in a game?
Yeah.
He feels like he broke his arm at training one day.
He's
He
had
did
a very
the
weird
wrestling thing in the
career,
off-season.
Callum Mills. Like when you consider, how he came in, so much hype, and then just missed weird important games and all sorts of stuff.
Anyway, best of luck. Hopefully he can get up if they make it for the grand final. But you're probably looking at either Robbie Fox or Taylor Adams might get a gig. Whether you want to go defensive or you want to go more of a midfield addition.
Different players. Be interesting to see what they do.
And Todd Marshall will miss for Power. So that's one of those, until sort of this year, one of those dead eyes up forward who usually can convert those opportunities. So
that'll be
probably looking at Charlie Dixon.
Reprieve for Charlie Dixon.
I'd read this morning that Kane Farrell is trying his very, very best to get up for this game. So that could also be
a big
watch.
inclusion. If they can get him back.
Tip and margin?
I'm going to go Port Adelaide.
Oh.
Only because I'll draw your attention back to our pre-season predictions. And I actually had Port Adelaide Brisbane playing in my grand final. So
didn't you have a showdown?
I had a showdown, so I got that one wrong. But let's forget about prelim week. I got Port and Brisbane going in the grand final. I said that in March, so I'll stick with it now. Gun to my head, I probably would have been tipping Sydney this week, but as I said, I'm gonna stick fat with what I said at the start of the year. Port by 10, and I'll already give you my tip for the other one. Will be Brisbane to beat Geelong. But
Jay?
Sydney by 45.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think one will be close and one won't be, which we generally see. And I think there's so many reasons that make me want to believe and make me think Sydney's going to win this game. And we've touched on a lot of them. Yep. They're fresh. They're a better team. They're at home. I think they're going to win this. I think they'll win this one. I think I said this a few weeks ago and I was wrong about the Port Geelong game, but I think they will have this one done. By three-quarter time.
I think you're right in that Sydney, their baseline will be good enough. But if Port can get all their midfielders firing, they haven't had them all firing this final series. No. Butters, Rosie.
Well, it's not just the midfielders; it's the whole team. Yeah. I think they've got a few weak links across the ground. I mean, Charlie Dixon, if he's going to come,
if Radigalee can start clunking marks instead of missing,
Radigalee has been disappointing. Francis Evans, he's just not up to scratch to play in a final. Like, I don't care if he's doing a job. Charlie Dixon, we saw him play against Geelong.
Slow.
And it was awful. So there are a few real question marks for Port.
Can I get to my tip?
You can.
Power by 1.
You're both going Port. Wow.
Come on, Port. There's a sense of deja vu amongst Cats fans this final series. Well, they're into another final series, I guess, so that's part of it. But their opponents, so Cats are coming off playing Port for the third time in a qualifying final since 2020. And they now face the Lions for the third time in a prelim since 2020. So familiar foes, both of those sides. And history, Christian, seems stacked against the Lions in this matchup.
Yeah, so since 2019, it's 6 wins and 3 losses in Geelong's favour against Brisbane. So it's not the 8-0 one-sidedness that we're seeing in Sydney.
Should be 5-4 after that game
Zach
down
Bailey.
at the
Zach Bailey one,
game.
yeah. But as I said, Sydney coming in with an 8-game losing streak to Port Adelaide. Brisbane are coming in sort of a little bit behind the 8 ball, 6-3 in their last 9 against Geelong. But what Geelong's been able to do is they've kept Brisbane to an average of 62 points per game since 2019, which is the lowest of any team. In that time, Brisbane scored 91 points per game. So Geelong's defence,
5 goals better
it
off than
was
average.
pouring down earlier this season,
it
which
was
probably
average.
helped them. These two teams do play a lot of. Go back and watch the footage. These two have played some very, very wet games in the past. But even talking about when they've played in the dry games, Geelong's defence has just kept. So Brisbane's only been able to score from a goal from 18% of entries against Geelong since 2019. That's the lowest percentage of them against any side, and the lowest percentage Geelong conceded to any side. So you just look at Geelong's defence for 6 years. Have had Brisbane's measure. The one stat for Brisbane in that time since 2019. If they score 90 points or more, Brisbane, against any opposition, 65 wins from 71 games. So 65 wins, 5 losses and 1 draw if they score 90 points. When they don't score 90 points, they're 33 wins, 39 losses. So again, the top line stat for this one is, can Geelong's defence just do what they usually do to get against Brisbane, keep them to 60, 70 points, and then Geelong just need to put in 12 of their own goals to get the result done?
Can they do it? I mean, potential in, so Tom Stewart potentially back in. Where's Sam DeConing in all this? I actually don't know.
He's fit. I just heard this morning that they've just got to make a call whether they want to include him or not. So
there's some potential. I think last time, or in previous meetings when these teams have played, I think, between Jay Colajazzi and DeConing, there were 6 intercept marks between them in the first half, and that was in the 2022 prelim. So, there's form there. And do you want to kind of bring that in and I don't know, rehash bad memories for the Lions, or do you stick with what's worked so far? I mean, potential ins for Geelong are Stewart, Hawkins, Cam Guthrie, DeConing.
Yeah.
They've got some selection calls to make.
They do. I don't know about Cam Guthrie. I think he hasn't played a lot of footy, and coming back in the midfield is a big risk. I think Hawkins is an interesting one. Whether you play him or not, I think Hawkins can still have a quarter. I have no doubt Tom Hawkins can still have a quarter where he kicks 3 goals. But it's fascinating to see what they do. Do you change what's working? Because we've seen players come in that we saw it with Carlton. We've seen it with Justin McInerney as well for Swans. Like players coming back in that just weren't quite ready, and it does backfire. And you wouldn't want to make 1 or 2 changes too many, and it does cost you a spot in the grand final. I think I'm always looking at the best players, the star players. I think they win you games, and they are the reason why you win games. And obviously for Brisbane, it's Lachie Neale. Now, he was tagged on the weekend, and I think that's what everyone should be doing because he is such a damaging player. And it's not just that he's damaging and he's a great player and we know how good he is. It's that when he plays well, Brisbane almost always win. Since the start of 2022, when Lachie Neale is allowed to have 32 disposals, he's had 32 disposals in 26 games since the start of 2022. They've won 25 of those 26 games. Now, it's not to say that if you keep him to 31, you're guaranteed to win. You cannot let him have free reign, run amok, do what he wants to do because they will win. The numbers say they win. And it's not just the disposals either. When he has... where are we? When Lachie Neale has 15 plus contested possessions, they're 25-6, 12 or fewer, 14-10. So there's a lot of numbers that suggest, like when he plays well, their chances of winning skyrockets. He's the one. So now is there another change that gets made for someone like Mark O'Connor has done that job before? Tom Atkins has done it once or twice. I think there's a few different players. Now there's the part, I think you mentioned before we started, do they go with what has worked in the past, knowing Brisbane will be ready for it, or do they throw a totally different... Do they throw Tom Stewart at him? Do they throw something totally different that they're not going to expect?
So you look at like previous years. So 2020 they played Brisbane against each other twice. The first time they sort of put Parfitt and Guthrie on him and had did a good job. But then the next one they did Duncan and Selwood sort of tag teamed him. 2021 they used O'Connor on him in both games, so they went back to back. 2022 they used O'Connor on him in the first game, then Atkins and Selwood on him in the prelim. In 2023, they used Blickstaves and Stewart on him with a little bit of Atkins. And then in round 6 earlier this year, they've used O'Connor. So looking at previous years, it's almost like they haven't backed up with the same guy straight away because they sort of go, all right, he did such a good job on him last time. Let's actually get someone to do the same job, but a different name that they're not expecting. So it is interesting because he's not in the team at the moment. You know, the 3 or 4 names here that have tagged him in the past is Cam Guthrie, Parfitt's on this list, Selwood and O'Connor, who was sort of not in the teams, you know. So Atkins in the team and Blickstaves is an option. But from who they've used in the past, most of those players aren't in the team. So I think to me, from a quick look at it, it's probably going to be Tom Atkins, unless they do bring in a selection swing. If you see O'Connor's name on the team sheet, he's in there for one reason only.
Coming into the finals, you were a bit sceptical about the Cats, and for a variety of reasons. But I think the thing that stood out to us about their qualifying final win over Port was the production they got out of their bottom 6 players.
Yeah, and with all due respect to the bottom 6,
they back it up?
Maybe these guys that we perceived or we thought were their bottom 6, maybe they're not their bottom 6 anymore because we saw some really, really strong performances, notably from Sean Manor, who was the number 1 ranked player on the ground.
He was their best player. That was the name I was about to throw you when you talk about bottom 6. You would have had him in the bottom 6
because that's what I meant.
Best player, so how can you judge it? Yeah.
He obviously kicked 3 goals, I think 3 direct goal assists and 19 disposals against the Power. But it's not just him. There's been, Shannon Neale played well. Like, is he the one that would go out if they brought Tom Hawkins in? Probably. He was pretty good in that game. Took a few contested marks, hit the scoreboard, a couple of goals. And then it's some of those other players that are going through the midfield and winning a little bit of ball and kicking goals, Tanner Bruin and Jack Bowes, and they're just getting a contribution.
Both had 18 and a goal on the
Yeah, they're just getting
Power.
contributions from everyone. And I think that was something that was a bit of a knock on Geelong a few years ago when
Agreed.
they had more of that top end talent, but the bottom sort of, a bit like what we've sort of discussed with Carlton at times. So, yeah, I think if Geelong get that production from across the board again, then that will hold them in great stead. Then they will be tough to beat.
Who are you tipping and by how much?
I'm going to go against what I said off the top about that team's backing up because it is tricky to do. But I think, like you always say, you like to tip against history and sort of say, well, things have to change eventually. I'm going to go with Brisbane. I think there's a part of it that felt like they play well when the pressure's not there, Brisbane. It's not a knock on them, but when the pressure's there, they've struggled at times. I think go back to that final series where the grand final was at the Gabba. That was a great opportunity for this Lions team, and they blew that one. There's been several times where they've blown leads and all that sort of stuff. When the pressure's off, they thrive, and we saw it. That game was over against the Giants. They came storming back. They won it. And I feel like there's a bit of the free hit now. If the Geelong's expected to win, they're coming down. They know they can beat this side. Like you said, what was it, 3 and 6? But like as you said, it should really be 4 and 5 over the last 4 or 5 years. I think they can definitely win this game. And if they're back on grand final day, regardless of who they're playing, I think they'll think they can win that too. I'm going Brisbane by 4 points.
Christian, any thoughts?
Yeah, very similar. I was going to say Brisbane by 5. Again, just going back to my original tip from the start of the year.
Yeah. I think the Lions, similar problems.
We can't all go
No.
Brisbane.
I'm saying they had the similar problems, right? So it's their efficiency inside 50 and their ability to kick straight. And while they kick straight in that back half of the game against the Giants, they started really poorly. And better teams will put you away when you start like that. And I don't know if I can trust Brisbane's forward line to come up with the goods. I think I'm going to go with Geelong by 9 points.